Also wondering how someone could honestly, be so heartless to say he knew how I felt a little over 24 hours and learning of my son's death.
We have a clip here of a woman named Cheryl Rex. She is the mother of Dylan Marola, who is one of the U.S. service members who was killed during the botched withdrawal of our troops from Afghanistan under President Biden when he brought our troops home, basically went about it all the wrong way. I supported it, but he went about it all the wrong way. He pulled the troops out before pulling out our civilians and then had to send troops back in, and then several of them were killed in an airport bombing. And now we're hearing this. They just had a hearing on the families of the people that were lost in this incident, speaking out about how they feel it was mishandled and how they feel this administration, including the president himself, has behaved bizarrely in the aftermath. Let's take a listen to this clip from Cheryl Rex, the mother of one of the fallen soldiers, about what Biden said to her when her son was brought home from overseas.
When Joe Biden, our elected president, entered the room, when he approached me, his words to me were, my wife Jill and I know how you feel. We lost our son as well and brought him home in a flag-draped coffin. My heart started beating faster, and I started shaking, knowing that their son died from cancer and they were able to be by his side. Also wondering how someone could honestly, be so heartless to say he knew how I felt a little over 24 hours and learning of my son's death. After this encounter, I have never had any personal correspondence, nor has my son been honored or his name spoken by this commander-in-chief or his administration on what I feel is because of their failures and poor planning to exit our troops from Afghanistan.
So, for context here, President Biden has repeatedly falsely claimed that his son, Beau Biden, lost his life in Iraq. That's a direct quote. What actually happened, and of course his son dying is tragic, but his son died of brain cancer in 2015, more than 5 years after he returned from a year serving in Iraq. This is from Daniel Dale, CNN's fact checker. And Beau Biden actually came back and served as the Attorney General of Delaware for these 5 years, and then died of brain cancer in the hospital with his loved ones, presumably. And then that has since been possibly attributed to the burn pits that he was exposed to in Iraq, although no one's sure of that connection. It's possible that cancer happened because of what he was exposed to in Iraq. And of course, that's terrible, right? We've had legislation addressing this. The burn pits is a very real issue. But for Biden to repeatedly falsely state that his son died, and basically claim or suggest that his son died at war, when reality is not that, let alone to a victim or to one of the victims of his botched withdrawal, whose son literally died in Iraq. I hate to say this, but because of Biden's bad judgment, it's the kind of thing where I actually have started to believe that dementia would be the best possible explanation, like the most favorable explanation for Biden. Because if he actually looked a grieving mother of a fallen veteran in the eyes and lied, and made it about him, and then lied about what happened to his son, then he is just astonishingly vile.
I think it's the latter, because Biden has a long track record of being a overt liar throughout his life. I mean, he's been in D.C. longer than I've been alive. This guy is on camera telling multiple whoppers over the years. I feel like he's known for being a dishonest person. And I think
plagiarism. He had plagiarism scandal.
Plagiarism. Yeah, exactly. Like I think giving dementia credit for this is too kind. I think he probably does have dementia right now. Like he certainly seems to be losing his capacities, even more so. But I think he is a dishonest person through and through. I think he's a thoroughly selfish person. I think he's like the stereotypical politician that is truly just in it for himself and will say anything and thinks he's like a wine and diner and wheeler dealer, and he's actually just very seedy and creepy and weird. I mean, this is a weird thing to lie about. It is easily documented how your son died. You have been a public figure throughout the entirety of that time period. There is no question that he did not come home with a flag draped over his coffin, which is what he apparently said to this woman. That is a crazy thing to lie about. It is crass. And I do think it was probably said in an effort to undermine the reality of what he had done and to try to make him more sympathetic to her, because he has blood on his hands for how he handled this. And I, too, was extremely supportive of getting out of Afghanistan. But leaving Afghanistan, the actual plan and the strategy of withdrawing was as badly implemented as the war itself. It was a complete disaster. It was inexcusable the way that they handled that. Anybody should have been able to predict the missteps that were taken during that whole plan. I just think there should be a place where he's coming from that's more humble, where he is apologizing, where he is, if you're commander in chief, you're the leader of the free world, take responsibility, man up, even when things go wrong. That's what a leader actually does. They don't try to shove off blame. They don't try to play victim themselves. The whole thing's despicable. But again, par for the course of this guy.
Yeah, and I will say this is the kind of thing he gets away with because of mainstream media. Like, they will fact check these kinds of statements, but they'll do it like quietly, like in a tweet or in one article or one segment. But then they would do untold hours of coverage fact checking Trump's blatant lying, to be fair, about like how big crowd sizes were, right? Like at his inauguration, which, while a very stupid thing to lie about, is also like not super consequential. Whereas Trump lied all the time, but often about like petty, tiny things. Biden lies less frequently, but about much more consequential things. And I think something like this is profoundly indicative of who a person is and how our president conducts himself. And it doesn't get totally not covered in mainstream media, but it gets a fraction of the attention it would if a Republican president engaged in this kind of a lie, which, to be fair, they have, right? But in those cases, it gets a lot more coverage. And that makes me very depressed about the state of the media. I mean, the same thing that and also because whether we like it or not, the mainstream media has a big impact on the Biden administration. Like, for example, President Biden finally acknowledged his granddaughter that he had ignored for the first several years of her life, the Hunter Biden's illegitimate child, because after all the months and months of right-wing media coverage, one New York Times columnist finally published a softly critical op-ed calling on Biden to do better. And he, within a couple of weeks, changed his tack on that. And so it's like, we do need the mainstream media to actually do basic journalistic due diligence, because unfortunately, Democrat politicians they just tune out Fox News, right? They just tune out. They certainly don't care what base politics has to say about them. And so it is, to me, this kind of story is a indictment of the media more than anything else. So yeah, look, the whole story, it's just the kind of thing that he never should have been allowed to just repeat this lie, but he's gotten away with it more or less. And I think it's vile. I think it's gross. I think it's unbecoming of the president, but it is what it is. And I just want to make sure our audience knows about this.